The very first question that arose was why?
Everything seemed fine as it was.
What exactly needs to be changed? A tool like a board was a completely unclear concept. How do you even work with that precisely? You perceived it as just another layer of oversight.
From the beginning, it was an advisory board, or as we called it then, a board of advisors.
Were there also worries that the owner had created the board specifically to replace the existing top management?
As a CEO, I already wanted some help.
So the board acted both as a witness and as a kind of guarantor for fulfilling commitments.
Having that kind of experience working with a board, even as a CEO, you're definitely ready for all sorts of challenges.
And do you actually plan to join a board yourself in the near future?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Boards of Directors with Sergiy Bulavin channel. Today, our guests are Dmytro Kozlov, Kateryna Konashchuk, and Nataliia Dubova. Dmytro and Kateryna are my colleagues on the Boards of Directors, and Nataliia Dubova possesses truly unique and extensive experience. She began her acquaintance with the board from the perspective of a company top manager, and later, she moved into the role of partner and co-owner of the company. That is, she has experience working with the board at the implementation stage as a top manager and later as a co-owner.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly how it was. Well, for me, it started in one role and ended, or rather continues in another, because we still communicate and have a good, great relationship. But now it's definitely in a different role. And my personal perception of many different things has definitely changed, so I am currently ready to freely talk about it.
In the courses that Dmytro and I provide at the Corporate Governance Professional Association, we discuss the internal challenges of implementing a board. And part of these challenges, as we mentioned, is the unpreparedness of the top management team or the resistance of the top management team to the implementation of the board. Let's start with what the primary reason was, or how Nataliia herself perceived the reason when she was a top manager during the implementation of the board, when the owner ultimately decided to create a board.
Well, at first, it was the owner's decision. We were already a consequence of the owner's decision. It was indeed the most successful and prosperous year, the very end of 2019, for the entire company, and many significant things were quite different. We were all truly together as one cohesive team. We had many distinct departments, and of course, there was one visionary founder, the owner. So the very first and most pressing question was, why?
Everything was going well.
So what needs to be changed? Why? Well, of course, growth, everyone has their own reasons, because the overall value of the company is constant development. Of course, you perceive it, or used to perceive it, as the next logical step in development. But a tool like a board, for me, 100% at that time, at the end of 2019, it was a completely unclear concept. How to effectively work with it, why it was truly needed, and what this additional, and I want to emphasize this, crucial control was for in order to move forward.
So it was perceived as control, right?
Well, of course, I could have just gone on Google and looked it up, or now you can simply just ask ChatGPT and it will provide the answer.
It's easier now.
Yes, it's easier now, yeah. But yes, you probably saw it as an additional form of control. I knew that before this particular situation, the owner had been deeply and extensively asking himself how to effectively bring his ideas concerning organizational resilience, capitalization, and comprehensive company development to life within the challenging and dynamic business environment. But I definitely didn't know that this was the way to achieve it, or that it would be done in this particular way. So yes, my perception was one of not knowing and not understanding how to work with this.
I remember that at that stage, owner Volodymyr Rogozny set several goals for the board. He envisioned the company's substantial growth, but primarily through a thorough systematization process. In other words, he truly wanted to introduce systematic processes. We remember that this included significant issues like additional financing, budgeting, creation, and effective implementation of certain essential policies. This was one of the board's tasks. Then there was the task of ensuring transparency when transferring authority to top management. At that time, Volodymyr had already made a decision.
By the way, I can't recall whether the partnership decision been made.
We came in right when the decision had been made, but there wasn't yet a regulatory document to govern it. That was the first thing. And the board also actively functioned as crucial witnesses to the absolute reliability of the long-term and enduring transfer of these important rights. It's not that we acted as formal arbitrators in any official capacity, but for you, having truly reliable and trustworthy observers present during the proceedings was also incredibly significant and held considerable importance.
Well, maybe, yes, in the fall, most likely in the year 2019, there was already some discussion about this matter. You still don't quite fully understand how it all works there. And so, of course, yes, there are these two incredibly powerful tools. On the one hand, a decision on partnership, and it hadn't happened yet. It hadn't even been formally established at that particular point in time. There were only the very first initial conversations about it. So, well, I wasn't even in the role of CEO at that specific time back in 2019. So yes, I absolutely had to take all of this significant responsibility on myself and to start working with it.
So the board acted both as a crucial witness and as a kind of reliable guarantor of fulfilling all obligations. Nataliia, weren't you genuinely worried that the owner deliberately created this board in order to completely replace the existing top management? That these three specific people were definitely brought in just to seize power within the company all at once?
There weren't really any such clear or significant worries because, first of all, by that particular point in time, I had already been working at this company for, gosh, how long? A full 15 years or so, perhaps even more than that. Of course, there was some understanding that I did have a certain stability in the company and could influence the results and get things done. But there was, first of all, a lack of trust, of course. And secondly, it's like a check-in or check-up to see whether these people in these positions are actually doing what they're supposed to do or delivering the results the owner wants. Well, of course, Volodymyr already had different expectations for the results after 2019, and I certainly understand why. Because the year was successful in terms of revenue. That's a different matter. But it was completely unsuccessful in terms of how the company ended this year. And it was clear that something needed to be changed or implemented.
So there was a lack of trust both in the tool, in the board as a whole, and in those who were on the board. By the way, you didn't know them.
I truly didn't know who I was dealing with at that moment.
Because it was Volodymyr who selected the members, but at the same time, I think it was very important that from the very beginning it was an advisory board, or as we called it then, a board of advisors. And it wasn't a supervisory board that would impose its decisions or whose decisions were mandatory. So these were indeed different perspectives. These were uncomfortable and challenging questions that were asked of the top management and the owner of the company. I'm not entirely sure if anyone had ever previously asked Volodymyr such truly uncomfortable and challenging questions before, but the ultimate result was invaluable advice that the owners could then thoughtfully choose to either accept or indeed not. Still, he possessed distinctly different perspectives and unique opportunities to thoroughly look at how to effectively develop and manage various things in a significantly different manner.
Well, I can definitely say that Volodymyr's full attention was completely focused there. That's 100% because he wanted results and he has already achieved them.
Was there any communication from Volodymyr when the decision was made to create that advisory board? He did communicate something to you and to other partners, didn't he? To what extent did that clarify the situation, or did it actually make things more confusing?
A comprehensive strategy was presented and thoroughly discussed, a strategy for change and growth. So we clearly heard about it, but again, we still had absolutely no idea how it would actually be implemented in practical terms. But we all knew that Volodymyr is quite a persistent person, and somehow it would definitely be realized. Yes, that's absolutely right. Let's call it the very first contact. I distinctly remember it. It was indeed quite a minimal strategic session with Sergiy. I don't remember, was Dmytro there or... Well, I think he wasn't. He wasn't quite there yet. It was just a strategic planning session with all the very key company participants. So not just the top managers and not just the heads. Back then, I think we weren't even top-level managers yet. We were just the heads of departments or business units, as we commonly called them at that particular time. And we were doing a comprehensive analysis. In other words, examining our strengths and weaknesses, considering the overall strategy and what we anticipated about the future. I still remember clearly that we didn't mention any of that in the risks, neither COVID nor the war. We wrote something there in terms of...
No one wrote about it.
Yeah, but just 2 short months later, the year 2020 began, which significantly changed a lot in our daily work, that's for sure.
Nataliia, the board in its original format started as an advisory board and then it changed a bit. As board members, we diligently negotiated with the owner for additional responsibilities that he then delegated to the board. So over time, the board gradually evolved. Probably that's exactly how your own attitude toward the board changed as a company employee or top manager, and perhaps your expectations from the board shifted as well.
Well, that's quite a broad and significant question, because then came the pivotal year 2020. The year 2020, both for my business personally and for my industry, was truly a transformational story. And moreover, this truly happened in completely different ways for one business compared to another. Each business indeed had its very own unique path. I realized then, and I still profoundly realize now, that the challenging path we went through in the significant year of 2020 was precisely the period of our crucial adjustment and the deeper understanding of what we can offer each other as individuals who, for some particular reason, initially met within the business environment. And so the initial thoughts began to form that perhaps by working together, it would prove to be more effective, or at the very least, collaborating should certainly bring about some positive and beneficial outcomes. First of all, we were faced with the significant challenge of reducing our budgets. Secondly, we had a financial director who was quite ineffective and inefficient in that crucial position, and consequently caused a lot of resistance to the essential development that was supposed to be happening within the company. But because, let's say, their approach just didn't align at all with the company's objectives. The development that was supposed to happen, this capitalization, this systematic approach, resilience and everything else with the person who manages the money. Let's be completely honest, the individual in that particular position truly needs to be moving in precisely the same direction, because we were playing entirely different roles. We were still very much focused on sales and on additional, perhaps even more comprehensive tools of some sort. This isn't a full-fledged CEO yet, but the chief financial officer should absolutely be the same kind of person, someone who sits with us in this inner circle and who is responsible for all the important things that concern everyone involved. And Artem and I understood, he's the third partner, that this particular situation was not the case at all, and we absolutely could not influence Volodymyr in any way, even though something significant needed to be done. Well, thanks to the advisory board, we were indeed able to influence this crucial decision, and the person was subsequently replaced. For some time, there wasn't even an immediate acting replacement available. It all happened very quickly and quite unexpectedly. And by the way, this pivotal moment was truly the first significant push and the foundational first step for us to genuinely start taking on substantial responsibility as CEOs. Because when you are operating from within the established system, well, that is certainly one particular story. But when you begin building something entirely of your own and bearing the full weight of the consequences and the profound responsibility for it, that is a completely different and far more challenging story altogether. And that's when I went to study to become a CEO. And those things were truly happening in parallel at the same time.
Here's a question. So, we started working, and as Sergiy mentioned, at some point, this was already in 2020, we switched to a more systemic approach in the board's work, right? I remember the tasks, the schedule, the follow-ups, and all of that. And I'm curious, from our perspective, the board's point of view, that was the beginning of systematization, but how was it perceived from the CEO's perspective?
From the CEO's perspective, at first it genuinely felt like I was being given significantly more work. First of all, every single month there are always some specific tasks to diligently complete. You absolutely have to get essential information from one particular person, right to someone else entirely, and also consistently keep track of various important follow-ups. So yes, it's truly about maintaining strong discipline and taking these deliberate steps toward comprehensive systematization. And secondly, of course, it's also a matter of control. Well, we certainly understood that I, for sure, for quite some time, perceived it exactly as a fundamental way to effectively control how I was fulfilling my role as the CEO in my current position in terms of my overall responsibility, not just to Volodymyr as the founder, but in a much more general sense, yes. Well, you understand, there was also this important notion. We've worked together with Volodymyr for many, many years now. You have many effective tools for communicating with a trusted partner you know exceptionally well.
Well, it's about both trust and loyalty. But when we move to the case of the CFO replacement, loyalty shouldn't have outweighed professionalism. Unfortunately, since the person wasn't even given opportunities to change, there were no prospects for professional growth there. I'm very, very glad that the CFO and financial management have changed significantly. And then internal audit was also added to it as well, if you remember. So at a certain stage, already in 2021, in addition to the establishment when the financial system was already fully in place and there were clear indicators, a separate and independent internal audit function was also introduced, which reported exclusively and directly to the board, and we had the opportunity to see the indicators exactly as they truly were.
Let's go back to the beginning of the first crisis, which started in 2020 with COVID, when business collapsed. To what extent do you think the board contributed, helped, or perhaps didn't help at all in getting through this crisis?
Well, facing a difficult crisis or challenging situation together always seems considerably easier and more manageable than going through it completely alone. But I didn't fully trust you back then. Sorry, I mean, that particular time was still 2020. I still didn't trust it from the perspective that this is our joint result or a partnership where we're truly moving forward together on the same path. So for me, 2020 was, of course, about survival, transformation, and then recovery. That's exactly how it happened. But in terms of my thoughts, they were definitely quite cautious, for sure.
And then there was the second significant and impactful crisis, 2022, the start of the full-scale war.
Before that, there was a successful year, 2021.
Yeah, it was very successful.
So it actually served as a bridge between 2020 and 2022. And that's when, as far as I think, we really started working together with board as a team. Well, I can't say that during one-on-one meetings with Volodymyr or the partners, we didn't have arguments. Of course, we pushed back, and I can understand why that happened quite often. But if there was already a dialogue, if we saw something that really just didn't work for us at all, you remember, we would always ask, let's have an additional meeting. And we would say that,
yes, you bring it up, for careful review, for the board to thoroughly consider, so that we could effectively act as impartial arbitrators as well, and add some truly significant and compelling arguments, yes, to one side or the other. Sometimes it was indeed quite unpleasant for someone to hear our honest opinions, and they were often different, by the way. Yes, we certainly had different views, but
that's a kind of bias, by the way, which I think can actually happen with any kind of board. This is something to keep in mind for future cooperation between owners or top managers who work with boards or are on boards. The bias lies in thinking that it's the owner who hired these people, like he specifically hired them, and so they definitely won't be on your side because it was the owner who found them. The owner is the one who made agreements with them, explained them the strategy, and showed the pathways to its achievement. And as a CEO, or as someone who is already part of this story or process, you immediately have this bias that these are people who will almost always, in 90% of cases, be on the owner's side, not on the side of, say, top managers. But, of course, these people are primarily supporting the side of the business and care for it at most. Well, that's a different matter.
we've grounded ourselves with this question very often. What does this mean for the business, right? Abstracting from top management, it's really about the opinions, the positions, and when we discussed among ourselves, what does this mean for the business? What is the outlook? What will we achieve or not achieve? What obstacles might there be? Yes.
I need to comment here. By the way, it's important to highlight the significant role of Volodymyr, the owner, because his idea of creating the board was also based on the intention to protect the company from the owner, well, in quotation marks, of course, from certain actions. He understood this, and that's really great.
Going back to the year 2022, to that truly powerful and significant crisis related to the invasion, how did the board, top management and the owner effectively cooperate at the initial stage of this critical crisis?
Yes, a significant decision was made right at the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, you see. By the way, before the invasion, we had placed a really big bet on the year 2022. There were very high expectations for every single business, for every business unit. It was supposed to be, as for everyone, I truly think, the most successful year. Yes, because there was still a significant after effect from COVID. And it was the very start of really earning and recovering the market. But then the year of 2022, full-scale war happened. And I distinctly remember that, it seems, in the very first crucial hours, we all checked in where each and every one of us was located, who was in which specific place. And we set up at first, I don't know, please remind me, was it weekly or perhaps even daily? It was indeed daily, yes. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, at 15, no. Yes, we would consistently meet there, and we would thoroughly talk and carefully check in with each other. First and foremost, it was profoundly about support. When you genuinely meet and consistently talk every single day with people you've been diligently working with for 2 years, achieving shared business results together, that's comprehensive support on every level. And every day at precisely 3 p.m., we would consistently meet and talk. Well, as always, money, what's on the balance sheet, what's truly happening with the financial aspects and clients, people and technology, in other words, ensuring the entire system from the perspective of potential risks and so on. These were indeed the main things we thoroughly discussed. Yes, and this happened approximately every single day. At 15 koga, we would continuously call and talk, precisely where everyone was located, who was in current touch, who wasn't, who truly needed immediate help, and how the available resources were being effectively used and would be utilized going forward.
Access, remote access capabilities.
And it's not even about what's truly happening within the business itself, because we all clearly understood that business isn't just happening. It's so completely transformed nowadays. Everything is structured so very differently indeed. That's precisely how it was for quite an extended period of time throughout 2022, and it was only around the summer months that we, I believe, managed to get back to a more regular and consistent routine when we subsequently started meeting once a month again. But I distinctly remember that in addition to those once-a-month meetings, we also consistently worked with me personally on the specific paths and overall development strategy. What other significant projects? What other potential directions? What could possibly be achieved?
Expanding into Europe, the European market.
Well, with me, it wasn't really about Europe. No, that was more with Artem. And we were developing a kind of strategic map of opportunities. My work in particular was more focused on identifying the opportunities, exactly where the core of my business could be implemented during the war.
So we're ensuring ourselves there during the war, potentially until it ends and after, by using these opportunities and addressing our threats.
Nataliia, having gone through such a journey, working with the board, getting into the company's top management, to becoming a partner and co-owner of the company, in your considered opinion, how truly useful is a board, an advisory board, a supervisory board, or even a transitional board as a strategic tool for business? To what extent would you recommend or not recommend the creation of such boards?
At this particular point in time, considering how much time has indeed passed and how my professional role has also significantly changed as well, I can now say with absolute and complete certainty that this is truly the essential tool that business owners, especially those owners who, let's say, don't necessarily want to just relax, I'm not a big fan of that particular word, but who genuinely want to take on other important roles or actively create new partnerships and develop new businesses. This is definitely an excellent and valuable tool for getting comprehensive support, not only from people within their immediate team. Because sometimes not everyone in the team thinks the same way as you do, or not everyone shares the same desire for growth as you do, or to move forward in some another way. That's the first thing. So this is exactly the kind of tool that can serve as a partner for the owner in the context of their company. Secondly, I profoundly believe that the board should and indeed can serve as this crucial advisory body, offering a distinctly different perspective on certain complex things where you might not necessarily be completely blind, but you either genuinely lack the necessary resources, the precious time, or you're simply too deeply immersed within the system. And I am increasingly and firmly convinced that various different consultants, especially, of course, not those superficial Instagram charlatan consultants, but rather those reputable environments where you find established associations of experienced people who diligently work on boards or well-regarded business communities and so on, they can also significantly help you, at least for a certain period, to make truly breakthrough moves in various critical areas where you might not feel particularly confident or secure. For example, if we consider the field of marketing, you want to implement something entirely new and innovative, but you currently do not possess the required expertise in this specific area. You don't yet have someone who understands the external market, and you don't know how to integrate this into your system. You can simply start by bringing in people who already have truly great cases, talk to them extensively, and even involve them directly in the process to track how this particular result or sales system is being replicated. And you can lay everything out clearly, just like this. The risk management system. Well, virtually every aspect of business that needs development or comprehensive systematization, you can certainly work on as an integral part of a dedicated team with other highly skilled people. So yes, the board can take different forms. It can also be a supervisory one. Why not? And with different goals for the owner as well, that is very possible.
So, if you were to look back at your past self, at Nataliia in the year 2019, who was just beginning to truly get acquainted with such a tool as a board, specifically an advisory board at that particular time, what advice, Nataliia, would you give yourself at the very start of this journey? How many years have passed? 6? Well, 5, maybe 6?
Damn, that's a lot. Sorry, I am truly sorry for my French. Yes, 6 years have passed. Advice? Well, basically my first piece of advice to anyone right now would be to be open to any opportunities, any new knowledge, or any other new things that may happen in your life or in your business. Being close to all that means not giving yourself, your people, or your company the chance to grow. And to become more resilient, anything, more capitalized, and so on. It's not about scaling or rapid development at all. Again, I probably already think more like a responsible owner than a typical CEO. So the first question that comes to my mind is, who can do this for me? Or who should do it overall? And of course, since I'm always looking for an answer to the question, who should address this task, or rather, this business need, and how it should be done, so any tools are fine with me. That's 100%.
What recommendations or advice would you give to those top managers who currently work as top managers for the owners who are now planning to implement a board to their companies?
The first piece of advice is that it's definitely a truly great, and I think even a remarkably quick, tool for your professional growth. Because having that kind of expertise working with a board, even as a CEO, definitely you are prepared for all sorts of challenges. Or even if those highly skilled and experienced top managers plan to work at different companies in the future, it's still 100% invaluable additional expertise and profound experience that will significantly benefit your professional journey and career development. Because the ability to work effectively with a board, to be fully accountable, to budget and to create, well, that's a truly significant part of being a top manager. That's the first piece of advice. The second crucial piece of advice is that you don't just necessarily have to work exclusively with the board. You can significantly influence the overall development of relationships. You don't have to perceive it as a form of strict control. On the contrary, you can proactively take the initiative, make thoughtful requests, and effectively use the most valuable things this powerful tool can genuinely offer you.
More like the collaboration.
Yeah.
Use recommendations, for example, or getting an advice. And not just that, let me remind you, we also had a case of searching, for example, for effective representation in America and other cases. So it is crucial to involve the board with its established reputation and extensive connections to effectively help solve the company's pressing issues.
And now, well, this is again the third point, about openness. This isn't really about control, it's profoundly about openness. And right now, as I carefully observe how even large businesses in Ukraine are developing, I clearly see that they all work effectively with a dedicated board. In any case, some with supervisory, some with advisory, in different ways, but they've all been working with a board for years. They change their members because sometimes it's absolutely necessary to bring in new and diverse perspectives. However, these are companies that work with their respective boards.
Do you personally plan to join corporate boards yourself in the future, if the need arises?
Yeah, sure. In principle, I said that maybe I would even do it this year, but for that you need to go through a specialized training, which you have to complete. For me, that's the next step. After the training, I will complete. And I think that already having quite a significantly extensive level of expertise in precisely how board work is conducted, I would most definitely like to give it a try. For me, it wasn't even a question of money, but rather about gaining this valuable experience of effective communication, of creating such dynamic ecosystems where you can interact with many different people. Right now, in my current study group, many of the people I study with are actively serving on boards, and many also consult as well, both on a pro bono basis and otherwise, simply because it really is a truly great tool to look not only deeply inside your own business, but also to gain valuable perspectives from the outside.
Nataliia, Kateryna, and Dmytro, we sincerely thank you for your valuable participation in this program. Thank you too.
Thank you for offering us a valuable chance to see the other side of the coin, to truly see how it all works.
And it's quite interesting to reflect upon after everything has truly happened. A significant amount of time has passed. I think that achieving great company results and, in addition, fostering good relationships afterwards.
Absolutely true. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. See you on Boards of Directors with Sergiy Bulavin channel.